welcome to another edition of 10 for the Developers. I'm Dave Haddock, lead writer.
I'm Ben Lesnick, Director of Community Engagement and Ships.
And so this is where we take 10 questions from subscribers who are our subset of our community, who provide a little bit of extra every month to allow this sort of added amount of community engagement, and we do our best to answer them.
Yeah, our subscribers allow us to do programs like this, ATV, RTV, Bug Smashers, all the community engagement you see us doing every week. So we really appreciate what you let us do. And now some questions.
All right. This is from Thanatos. I just read the entire writer's guide in one sitting. You are a brave individual. Is all the information included therein still up to date, or will there be some more updates coming? For the most part, it's pretty up to date. I mean, we are changing some aspects of it, and it's actually been sort of on a back burner, lingering list of things that need to get done to basically keep it more, because we've been doing, obviously, you know, with all the script stuff and Squadron 42 stuff, we've been developing the PU history and the alien races and civilizations and stuff like that. So we'll probably be updating it soon. I mean, part of it is also it's about how, you know, how we parse out that information, but yes, there'll probably be an update.
I thought the writer's guide was great, especially early on, where we didn't have the game for people to play, but you could already imagine yourself in the universe, and you could start creating your own fiction.
Yeah, and it was it was fun too. Also having the aspects of it that we started doing with the lore builder, where there were the areas that we hadn't quite figured out, and so we got to turn to the community. And I remember particularly we generated a lot of like bands that did music and beer.
Star Citizen full of bands and beer. No, I always like looking back on like a show, and it'll always be like 20 or 30 years later. Oh, there's the Star Trek Writers Bible, and it's just cool that we put it out there for everybody early on.
Yeah, actually the Star Trek Next Generation Bible is I have it in my office. Actually, if you haven't read it, you should check it out.
Well, one of my favorite things in the world is the licensed tie-in fiction that comes very, very early. Like, so they kicked off some writer writing the first couple novels before they shot the first episode. So Data has blue skin and emotions, and it's great.
It's amazing. Question 2. Do you want me to read it?
We can read it. Phantom of Truth asks, when you wrote Whisperer in the Dark, what were your influences, intentions, and where do you see that story going into the future?
With that one, that was actually our first Jump Point story. So it was actually, I think I was actually writing it at the same time we were closing out, because that was still during the crowdfunding phase, I believe.
We started that off in 2012, end of 2012, and I think we realized we'd set up all these subscriptions, we promised people original fiction, and we need a story really darn fast.
Yeah, so that one it was a weird one, because it was at the time I was still writing the Cal Mason one, still writing the Kid Crimson one, and still writing the news updates. So I think part of it was just trying to set, Cal Mason was a very high adventure type thing. Kid Crimson was a sort of more noirish crime thing. So this, weirdly enough, needed to feel distinct from those two. So it kind of went for more horror, like Lovecraftian. There's a story he did called The Nameless City that has this very long segment of it where this guy is just crawling in a tunnel, and it's really claustrophobic and uncomfortable and kind of and cool. And so it was that type of feeling that having this this woman going through this abandoned, old, destroyed civilization, and weird things start happening, and is it real, is it not, and stuff, and trying to walk that line of it's not supernatural stuff, but could it be? Who knows? So yeah, that was sort of the idea behind it. And as far as the story for the system is going to be interesting, because that's Hades' system, so that's the one that you guys are all going to get to kind of poke around in one day. So we'll see where that story goes. But Tanya's going to, I think, probably make another appearance somewhere. We'll have to see.
It's crazy thinking back to those early days where you could be writing 3 serials at once, and you were doing all the graphics for the website. And I think back, how did I do all of the CS tickets and run the forums?
I have no.
And plan the sales. It's crazy.
It was nuts. I mean, I remember watching you guys do the last 24-hour live stream, and I was at home when you guys were in Austin, and I was like, I don't know how they're standing.
I fell asleep.
Blue Goggles asks, as mind-racking writing can be, I'm sure it's just as satisfying. What area of writing has been more fascinating, the large-scale lore of whole races, events, etc., or the personalities and conduct of individual characters? I kind of like the individual characters a bit, but the large-scale stuff is actually fun because if you get stuck on character stuff, you can actually just completely shift gears and be like, I'm going to write about, or think about how, beer and bands for an hour and work on stuff like that, and think about music or architecture and stuff. So the large scale stuff is a nice respite, but I don't know. I always I like characters and making people feel unique and getting hooked into that sort of more personal storyline. So I would kind of go the latter, but the large scale stuff is super fun.
I like the small scale stuff. I certainly don't write as much as you do, but when we do things like sales and just the tiny little details that build the universe that don't matter at all.
Yeah.
The first one I remember was the branded pillow in the Aurora. Of course.
I love the space comforter that's on the Starfarer, like the captains are like the planets and stars. It's amazing.
First Citizen asks, will the Star Citizen novella be a hard copy as well as digital at some point? Always nice to hold the book.
That is an excellent question. I don't know. I think we're still trying to figure out how that's, it's...
Well, the answer is we don't know yet for that specific thing, but I saw there were a whole bunch of novella questions that spawn off of this one. So where the heck is the novella? What is the novella?
Well, I have actually been working on it, weirdly enough. I think the setup for it is awesome. I think people are really going to like that. And I'm sort of at the outlining stage of it. Time's been a little tight of late, so I haven't had that much time to work on it, but it's coming along. But I think the setup I think is really awesome, and it's going to be a lot of fun to get into. But yeah, hopefully I can start working on it soon. I think we'll start loosening up a little bit, so I can.
Yeah, I've heard that before for the past 3 years.
This is true.
But I should say, I love the fact that you guys do all of the fiction yourselves. Like back in the Wing Commander days, they would say, okay, here, contract this out to some generic sci-fi writers, and here it's all people who have a grasp on the universe.
we have had outsourced some really good fiction. The stories that just finished in Jump Point and stuff, have had a lot of really good writers contribute to it and stuff like that. And it's great to see people are able to, because again, part of the difficult thing with this is contracting a writer to come into sort of an established universe, and if you're approaching them, because they don't necessarily know the world, and you have to kind of help them, and a lot of people have been kind of plugging in very quickly and hitting the ground running and writing some really cool stuff. So it's been great. But yeah, it's always fun to we can kind of be very insular and kind of geek out about the little stuff that we write. Okay, next question comes from Obersick.
This is a two-parter.
It's a two-parter. Mm-hmm. So for Ben Lesnick, how much do views, like-dislike ratio, as in factors outside of direct community outrage, affect your decisions concerning YouTube shows, articles, and so on?
To be honest, specifically, the likes, dislikes does not especially matter to us. We're still in a very much gut feeling in terms of reaction. We after doing this for a couple of years, we kind of have our sources for how the sources we trust to accurately represent the community. So, I know that when this person is outraged and they're complaining, that I should definitely listen to them and we should think about things differently. But pure numbers for, if they didn't retweet this enough, or this ship sold 80% instead of 90% of whatever we expected, not especially valuable to me personally.
So it's not metric based; it's more instinctual.
Yeah, and we started to do the metrics. The whole company has changed so much. We gather the metrics, we look at them, but I would say at this point we still do a lot more with just the human feeling.
Right.
And for Dave Haddock, when millions of people play a game, inconsistencies, plot holes, and so on are bound to be found. So what happens to Squadron 42? How, in that case, how would you react? Ignore them, patch them, retcon them into the next act?
Well, there are definitely no plot holes.
Yeah, this is like a pre-problem.
Yeah.
You're gonna screw this up.
No, I mean, it's it's one of those things. I mean, we do the best we can to try and kind of troubleshoot that sort of stuff, like among the sort of internal reviews and make sure that logic is tracking and people, and again, I mean, it's the tricky nature of storytelling in general. Like those connections between logic points can work for some people and they can't work for other people. So to the people that it doesn't work for, it becomes a plot hole. But but other people aren't bothered by it. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, I don't know if there's something that's conceivably fixable, just as a hypothetical. I don't know. I think we would have to kind of gauge it based on how glaring the plot hole is. If it's sort of kind of inconsequential, maybe we would just probably ignore it, and then try to address it maybe in the next, the next section or game or whatever.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. So let's ignore like giant plot holes, but something really, really minor, like say Tanya has a different hair color in two different places. Do you go back and fix something that's already been published, or do you explain it later? What's your preference there?
I mean, I try to, personally, I dislike retconning, especially I feel like with what we're doing, because we're building it in sort of public view, that, everyone's getting really involved in this stuff, and the last thing we want to do is to basically say like, oh yeah, forget all that, kind of start over, and it's this, they're not made out of marshmallows, they're made out of, sponge cake, and people go, oh, but I like marshmallows.
Stop spoiling the critique.
Sorry. But yeah, I mean, I think if it's easy enough, I mean, we've found inconsistencies within, sort of jump point articles and, between jump point articles and old news dispatches. So when possible, we just go back and we'll just sort of fix them to consolidate and at least be consistent with them. So, so far we haven't had anything sort of, anything really egregious that's really come back to haunt us. But so it also, I think, in the early days, and as you remember, we would aim broad.
Yeah.
So it was all just sort of like, it's kind of this feeling rather than, it's specifically blah, 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 A, B, C, and D. So we gave ourselves wiggle room to kind of hone it down later because we knew we would come back to it. So
we kind of run into sort of a side problem with ships where we want to continue developing new ships that are also old ships. And,
right.
Oh wait, now we have 3 years of fiction where we don't mention the Anvil, whatever.
Yeah.
We just had that in a meeting earlier this week. We were talking about a ship we can't name yet, and we were like, okay, this feels like one that the military's been using for years. So.
But I think to a certain extent, I mean, because we're developing it, and I mean, no one has done that. That's kind of the crazy thing that I kind of keep circling back to. It's like, Star Wars came out, and that was Star Wars. There was not, the book on the universe of Star Wars and the different races and the different factions and stuff before the movie came out. So this is like the first time that we're sort of doing it backwards. So I feel like to a certain extent we have to, kind of go, oh yeah, this ship has been in service for 80 years and we just haven't mentioned it because, we didn't know about it.
This is only barely an aside, but actually just this last weekend I was asking myself, what was the Star Wars universe in 1978?
Oh,
so
God. I would be fascinated to.
Well, I looked it up. There were 3 children's books, a novelization, and it's crazy looking back at them. One of them is about, after the movie, Luke Skywalker is now a planetary settler, and he's at the Space Academy. And
really?
It's so different from anything anyone would have thought of.
Wow. So there was no plan of, or it didn't seem like they were alluding to any kind of setup for Empire Strikes Back. It was like,
no,
he's done.
There's even a point where he thinks back to Obi-Wan Kenobi and he's like, oh yeah, the Force, he mentioned something about that.
That's amazing. Okay. All right. Next question from Jackknife. One of the charms of the original Wing Commander was that there was this one ship, the Scimitar, that almost no one wanted to fly because it was widely regarded as slow and underpowered and obsolete. Granted, the team doesn't have the resources to deliberately design a flyable 30th century Edsel for Star Citizen, but have you thought about including stuff like that as, say, NPC background ships, or maybe having the lore categorized as marketing failures, ships that got rendered obsolete in their original function by evolving game mechanics?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. And in fact, Dave here has done some of the early ship stuff, down to the Zeus from early on.
Right.
It's more a point of how can we work these into the schedule. We also kind of have the idea that our existing ships are going to age. So you'll have the 2943 Aurora that is the model that's 5 years old someday, 10 years old.
Right.
And we, as we mentioned in another question, we are going back and saying, okay, here's another ship that would have existed back then. So de-aging or re-aging existing ships is an option. We do want to build more and more ships into the background of the lore. And as we get to the point where ships kind of go directly into the game rather than going through the concept sale proposal idea, we can do some more less popular ships that won't sell.
Right.
I will also note that for the example of Wing Commander, though, and this is the power of lore, the Scimitar, everyone hates the Scimitar. Everyone who played the game remembers hating the Scimitar. The Scimitar is bad. It's only bad because one of the characters, or several of the characters, repeatedly tell you it's bad in the game. It's like the second best ship in the game.
I kind of like flying the Scimitar.
Yeah, it's the guns.
That was like the big mass driver one,
Yes,
right?
it's the one with the mass drivers. It's so much more pleasant than the Hornet, and I have an easier time with it than the Rapier. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's important to note that, I mean, like, you know, an old ship and a new ship are basically equal in difficulty to create. Like, you have to go through as many steps. So whether the ship is 50 years old or is supposed to be the new cutting edge thing, like, sort of from a production standpoint, they're basically, it's the same, requires the same amount of work. So it's, you know, I think right now we're being a bit more, like Ben said, you know, being a bit more surgical about what type of ships we're coming out with, but
that is part of why we give ships a lineage. It's never just, well, sometimes it is, here's the totally new ship, but a lot of times, here's the Retaliator, and it has a 100-year history with UE. So we're kind of planning that in.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Hawks with an X, asks, why does the Endeavour have such weak armament for a deep space science vessel that's the length of an Idris? Could it get some point defense systems along the center hull to protect against torpedo attacks and ships attempting to directly board? Well, the first answer is that the Endeavour is not a combat ship. It's a science ship, so we've intentionally kept the weapons very limited. It's not an explorer either. It's a ship that goes to safer areas and does science. In fact, it has the armored cab specifically so you can detach the valuable, complex part and explore at your own risk. The other half of that question is, it's entirely possible we get additional point defense turrets. It's going to wait until we go into the white boxing, gray boxing stage, and we start playing around with it and go, okay, here's an obvious vector where enemy fighters take it down every single time. So we will build a solution to that. But until we get to that stage, it's hard to say.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, a lot of it is sort of on paper. It can be one thing, but like you said, once you see it in there and you.
I should say a lot of times every single ship goes into the game with it. Oh, here's the flaw we didn't see. Here's how we needed to play differently. So there will be changes, and that's a potential one, and we'll see.
Cool. Next question comes from Steve Hunter. Could you comment on the intended difference we will see between a citizen and a civilian in the game?
Well, the citizen makes the choice to defend the body politic with his life. No, that's the Starship Troopers.
Well, yeah, I mean, they get to vote for the Senate. I mean, that was sort of one thing. I mean, we sort of outlined, I mean, from the early days, I mean, you remember the very basic, differences of only citizens can have multi-system corporations, civilians can only vote in local governments, not in, imperial politics and stuff like that. I mean, if I remember correctly, I mean, while Chris wanted there to be a difference between the two, I seem to recall him saying that it wasn't as divisive as like a caste system in like medieval Europe or feudal Japan.
I've always seen it as much more of our equivalent of Yelp almost. Hey, I can trust this guy, he's a citizen, rather than citizens look down on civilians and so
Yeah,
on.
they're not,
So,
under the underfoot of the regime of the citizens and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit more of a, a choice. Like, do you want to commit to the empire, or do you not really care about the empire, but you still want to live in it? Like,
and as you attach it to gameplay, you need that lower spectrum too. The people who decide to be civilians or criminals need to have a viable gameplay experience too. So it has to be a choice rather than a ladder you climb.
right, and also, I mean, not so obviously better quality of life or something like that, where it's like, only civilians can have a job, or citizens can have a job or something like that. Like, but yeah, as far as the specific gameplay stuff, I think we're still sort of trying to hone in on that.
I'm just imagining it's literally the same as like a senior citizens discount. Citizens get $1.50 off their
you get an
plate.
awesome pin. You get to use a shorter line when transferring customs.
So Aragorn BH asks, how do you think working with Chris Roberts to make Star Citizen will be different and or the same if you'd work with Chris on a Wing Commander game? That's an interesting question. I've worked a little bit on lore for old Wing Commander games. I did all the lore for the Xbox Live Arcade game. I helped edit some of the novels and stuff. And I find going back that I don't take myself seriously. I look back and like, okay, Wing Commander's amazing. I love Wing Commander. I love everything about the universe. This is the part Ben came up with. I don't know about that. What was I thinking? So it's actually kind of been good to be doing Star Citizen, where it's this new thing that I get to see developed, and I have a part in that I don't know. I find it gives me more buy-in. If I were working on a Wing Commander game, I would be an obsessive, crazy person about continuity and just very argumentative, probably. So it's a good thing we're doing Star Citizen. But I'm actually more curious about you because you have so much more of the lore is yours, and you look at that and you say, there's Dave Haddock in writing form. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's awesome. I mean, and people seem to really like it. But I mean, again, it's not just me. I mean, there's so many aspects of the universe that, I mean, when we were doing early conversations and the Kickstarter thing that we were talking about that have, like you guys, I haven't touched ships. Like you guys came up with all the ships and all the awesome, like, I mean, it's still, the Retaliator to me is just a work of art.
Which is interesting because I look at the ships and like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to do this. I got to work with these incredibly talented people to come up with this. There's a little bit of me in there. But I look at a ship I did on Wing Commander Arena. I did a similar thing. I named all the ships. I did all the specs. I came up with their backstories, and I'm like, those are embarrassing. They're not as good as the other Wing Commander ships.
But no, I mean, yeah, it's been awesome. But yeah, there's so many. I mean, everybody contributes, and that's kind of one of the fun things about the company is that there's like it's a lot of everyone kind of banding together and coming up with cool stuff, and going for what's fun. And Eth9 asks, why are new ships coming out of concept sale and going into production? Example, the Reliant, Prowler, Herald, and maybe even the Buccaneer, instead of moving on to ships that have already had concept sales years ago. Example, Merchantman, Redeemer, Reclaimer.
Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. A major one is that we kind of now have this pipeline down where the concept artists are in sync with the tech designers and everyone else, and a ship can very seamlessly go from one to the other and come out the other end, which you're seeing a lot with some of the smaller ships. The Sabre was finished very quickly. The Buccaneer is going to go right into active development, I believe. That's the schedule as of today. That may change tomorrow. Another big aspect is the kind of kits and the style sheets they build for the different manufacturers. You probably noticed that when we did 2.0, you saw a lot of Aegis and then MISC ships, because those are the ships that had their pipelines pretty much completed. And now you're seeing a whole bunch of Drake ships. We're finishing up the Herald, we're doing the Buccaneer, working on the Caterpillar. It all, there's a rhyme behind it. I know people are like, we want to see the Vanu Merchantman now, we want to see the Vanu Merchantman now. I want to see the Vanu Merchantman now. Everybody wants to see the Vanu Merchantman now, but we need to take time to develop the Vanu aesthetic. We need to do it right rather than right now. So the other ships' time will come. They're all scheduled out on the production pipeline now. I will also mention that the Prowler was one of the ones mentioned as going into production. We're still in concept on that one. It'll be a bit longer for exactly the same reason until you see it. we need to build the Tavaran race first, and we want to do that right.
Cool. And that is it. That is 10 developers.
It didn't feel like 10.
It did not. It actually ran rather quickly.
But I would like to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks to subscribers for making this possible, for asking the questions themselves. If we didn't get your question, we will not answer it.
Or you can bounce them over to the Ask a Dev threads.
Yep, we are on the forums, and
yeah, and also big thank you to our community at large in general for helping us do this at all. It's been awesome.
well, thank you to all human beings who, no. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching 10 for the Chairman. If you guys would like to see more episodes, go here. If you guys would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel and always keep up to date with all our video content, go here. And if you guys would like to watch episodes of Around the Verse, go here please. And I will see you in the verse.